Caddis Maximus here, this time with a 3/8 inch drive, breaker bar, and T-handle comparison. And review, of course. So I'm going to go ahead and do this review. I'll do a big extensions review because why not? Then I'll move into the big 50 ratchet 3/8 drive review and comparison. Then we'll move into specialty sockets, and that's going to be kind of a longer video, but it'll be a fun one. And then I will do a toolbox tour of the tools that I've already reviewed. How about that? Anyway, we have a variety of 3/8 inch breaker bars and sliding T-handles here because I do like to collect various tools. And part of the impetus was I actually started with these SKs down here. Then I found this Proto, which was a little bit longer. And then I found this Parex, and that's actually a snap-on. If you ever see any tools labeled Parex, let's take a closer look at this one. It's a snap-on. It's like it was their initial budget brand, but they discontinued it like in the 80s or 90s or something. It's basically near snap-on quality. It just seems like they have the QC or the finish, any parts that were a little bit too out of spec for snap-on, they just rebranded Parex, and we'll show that here. Parex. I liked it because it had this weird straight tapered end that's really compact, and actually I find this to be a really great shape. I really like it for some reason. And that was a little bit longer. Then we moved into one of the AutoZone Duralasts, and then I found a used Powerbuilt, and so that's both of these, and we can take a comparison look at the Duralast versus the Powerbuilt, because you'll find the Powerbuilt at O'Reilly's and of course the Duralast at AutoZone. They're both exactly the same length, which is interesting, within a fraction of an inch. I kind of like the shape of the Duralast handle. It seems like it's just a little bit more professional. I like it where it's a little bit more narrow there, and the knurling that the Duralast puts on, even though it's not very aggressive. One thing I do like about the Powerbuilts is that they're always extra thick. They really just throw a lot of metal at their tools, and I see why their name is still around, because they probably break a little bit less as compared to the Duralast, but the Duralast may have a higher grade of steel. And then, of course, Powerbuilt does this where they taper the fork, so the fork has extra meat down at the root, and I really like that. The Duralast is just a friction style anvil, and the Powerbuilt has this ball dentant, and I really like the ones that have ball dentants, because when you want to turn these handles straight, these are also known as spinner handles, they hold straight, and then you can spin the fastener out. The next one is this THandle, and to tell you the truth, I would recommend this one just because it has a really nice length. It's the longest out of all these, and there's plenty of good quality when you're just talking about a 3/8 inch breaker bar. I'm sure any situation where you shear this anvil, you'll know you're getting well close to that point and probably should move to a 1/2 inch. Otherwise, they do reinforce. They do have a taper on the head there, so the forks are nicer. They don't chrome plate the anvil, and that is better because it can reduce hydrogen embrittlement. Even though it's not impact, that's one of the reasons they do that. When you chrome plate chrome vanadium steel, it actually changes the metallic structure along the surface and causes a measurable change in the material. I was just reading about that. But anyway, here's the THandle, and it's a nice one. It's definitely a nice one. So this long one is the big Harbor Freight 3/8 inch drive super breaker bar. And all this is their standard 1/2 inch drive breaker bar. And then the anvil's just been machined down to 3/8. It's still actually the original 1/2 inch wide anvil. So they literally took the old 1/2 inch wide anvil and just machined a new one for 3/8. And this is one where I've certainly read people break off the square, which makes sense. I mean, this bar is way too huge for a 3/8 inch, but if you just, for convenience, it's nice to have just a long one, so you just don't have to struggle as much. And we'll move on to these sliding T-handles here. And sliding T-handles are nice because you use them with an extension or a socket, so once you've got the idea with these would be is you would break the fastener. And nice ones on these sliding T-handles will have some kind of cutout for the ball bearing that retains the handle to lock in. That way you don't have this issue where the socket's rolling around. And you break the fastener, and then most nice ones will also have a center position, so it'll center itself, and then you can spin it out like a T-handle Allen wrench. And we have a few brands here we'll take a close look at. This This is an old Plum. So this was a Proto before Proto and Plum merged. This is a very old one. This is probably made in the 50s. We have an old Pennons, which I like because it has a more compact head on it. We have the usual suspect, the Craftsman. The Craftsman does not have a cutout and has a surprisingly weak ball dentant. So the Craftsman's not the one I use the most often because the handle and the head twists. We have an old Williams here, which I really like because it has the smallest of all the heads. And they do a tiny little cutout notch to keep the head from swiveling. So I was surprised that all these the Pennons did not do that either, I should say. So the Pennons and the Craftsman are okay, but the Williams and the Plum are much nicer because they put a little more thought into those. The other nice thing about sliding T-handles is when you're using them, the brake fasteners, they don't have that pivot. So you're delivering the force to the socket and the fastener in a more direct fashion. And it's just a more solid way to drive a fastener. Although for some reason it's hard to find one. They all seem to have the same length handle. They're kind of more similar to upgrade to a speed wrench, I think, when they came out with them. But they're really strong because of that full wraparound head. We have a couple of these thin ones. These are some weird brand I found at some department store, but I like these because they're breaker handles. They're kind of like ratchets that don't ratchet. I think I've mentioned these in other ratchet comparison reviews. The nice thing is these have the absolute most compact head possible. And that's really nice. They also use the ball dentant is really kind of set a little further back on the anvil. And I like that aspect because the socket actually holds really tight against it. And so you can hear it barely rattles around. And you get a nice, comfortable, wider grip. And then a short handle when you're just lightly torquing fasteners. There are many valve cover gaskets where the torque is so light, it's really, a professional would do it really by feel because sometimes it's inch-pounds. And of course, this was in 1/4 inch. I don't know if I mentioned that. And then I do have a 1/2 inch version I didn't mention in its breaker bar review. This is kind of the similar situation where it's real flat. This is one of those serpentine belt tensioning tools that you would use with the 3/8 to get around a particular bend so you can release the belt tensioner. Anyway, that just about does it for this review and comparison. I did want to bring this up because I was hoping maybe some viewer might be able to identify this. It's like it's a distributor wrench 9/16. It has no branding on it, but you know it was intended as a functional tool because of the flashing. It's forged, but they didn't grind it off very well. So this came as part of some kind of set because it has a 3/8 drive with a ball dentant on the other end. So I was hoping somebody might be able to identify this thing. Otherwise, this little guy has been great for me when you're doing valve last adjustment. You can just have a socket, and the way this thing fits in the hand, it's perfect. And maybe someday I'll find out where it came from. Thank you so much for watching. Look forward to those more videos to come up, and please subscribe. Catus Maximus out.